Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on what time zones you are in. I'm Yeganeh, Rezaian, Community Protect Journalist, Senior Researcher, and I will be moderating today's event. We are very excited to host this parallel event to the UN's, to the UN's Annual Commission on the Status of Women and to discuss online harassment in the context of the experiences of Iranian female journalists in the diaspora. This panel builds off of research released earlier this year by Article 19, and the topic was online harassment against women journalists in the Iranian diaspora, which you can find an Article 19 link to it, which my colleagues will share. And you can also look into article19.org website and find the report there. Unfortunately, I have to add that my colleagues at the Article 19, who were the lead producer and leader of this report, were not able to participate in our panel today. That's very unfortunate, but we are hoping to continue the discussion and go ahead, move forward. There was a vetting process. I have to acknowledge that there was a vetting process to make sure for signing up for this event. And the reason for that was to make sure we could create a safe environment for our panelists, but also for our attendees and audience to have a conversation about such an important topic. I want to start by saying a very short introduction to the Iranian diaspora, so our audience know exactly what kind of environment we are talking about. Iran's diaspora is very large and diverse. There are more than 5 million or more Iranians living abroad, with the majority relocating to democratic Western nations. The largest concentration is in the United States, with others in Canada, Australia, Western Europe, and elsewhere. The diaspora has grown quickly, mostly since the 1970s, when hundreds of thousands of Iranian students studied abroad, and then following the revolution in 1979. And it's become one of the highest educated and top earning immigrant groups in most of these countries. And yet the political makeup has remained fractured. While some members are different about politics, have different ideas about politics back home inside the country, most oppose the regime's oppressive nature, but also punitive measures against citizens of their homeland. So some are, let's say, indifferent about the politics inside the country, but most of us are naturally very political people and oppose the regime. Two groups that are particularly vocal are members of the Mujahideen Khalq and some supporters who profess loyalty to the Pahlavi monarchy that was ousted by the revolution. These, as well as supporters of the Islamic Republic, have consistently made vile attacks against the Iranian journalists and the women on today's panel in particular. So we have different groups of political backgrounds and belief. Without further ado, please let me introduce our panelists, and they are fantastic sets of panelists today, mostly women, but we also included my dear colleague Sherif, Mansour, to make sure we have a very diverse group of panelists. Our first panelist is Golnaz Esfandiari, who is a senior correspondent in Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Central Newsroom, and she covers Iran and its surrounding region. I would like to refer to our panelists with their first name, but I understand that's not professionally necessarily accepted, but I would like to continue by saying Golnaz has reported from a number of countries, including Haiti, Afghanistan, and other places. She has interviewed prominent figures and Nobel Peace Prize winners, including our own Shirin Ebadi, as well as former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice and former Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Her reporting and analysis on Iran has been cited by the New York Times, the New Yorker, the Atlantic, Foreign Policy, the Los Angeles Times, and the Washington Post. In 2013, Golnaz was tagged for the third year in a row in Foreign Policy's top 100 Twitter list. The next panelist is Farnaz Fassihi. Farnaz is a reporter for the New York Times covering Iran. Previously, Farnaz was a senior writer and a war correspondent for 17 years at the Wall Street Journal based in the Middle East, covering wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Israel, Gaza, Syria, and uprising from Iran to Turkey and the Arab Spring. From 2016 to 2019, she was part of the Wall Street Journal's national security team covering foreign policy and diplomacy based at the United Nations. In 2011, she was a lead reporter in Wall Street Journal award-winning investigative series titled Censorship Incorporation, examining how authoritarian regimes around the world utilize Western technology for surveillance and censorship. Fassihi has been a journalist for 30 years. She was an investigative reporter at the Star Ledger in New Jersey and a local newspaper reporter at the Providence Journal in Rhode Island. She has won more than a dozen journalism awards, including Foreign Correspondent of the Year in 2014 from the Front Page Awards, and was a recipient of an Ellis Island Award and a Nieman Fellowship at Harvard. She's the author of a book on the Iraq War, Waiting for an Ordinary Day, and an email she wrote about the disastrous war in Iraq, which went viral, is included in an anthology of historical letters written by American women. Very well done. Last but not least, my dear colleague Sherif Mansour, who is an Egyptian-American democracy and human rights activist. Before joining the Committee to Protect Journalists, Sherif has worked with Freedom House in Washington, D.C., where he managed advocacy training for activists from the Middle East and North Africa. In 2010, Sherif co-founded the Egyptian Association for Change, a Washington-based nonprofit group that mobilizes Egyptians in the U.S. to support democracy and human rights in Egypt. He has monitored the Egyptian elections for the Ibn Khaldun Center for Development Studies and has worked as a freelance journalist. In 2004, he was honored by Al-Kalima Center for Human Rights for his work in defending freedom of expression in Egypt. Sherif has authored several articles, conducted research studies on civil society and the role of the new media and civil society in achieving democracy. He was named one of the top 99 young foreign policy professionals in 2013 by the Diplomatic Career. He received his master's in international relations from the Fletcher School at the Tufts University and his bachelor degree in education from Al-Azhar University in Cairo. He obviously speaks fluently Arabic, English, and he is our Middle East and North Africa program coordinator at the Committee to Protect Journalists. Before we start our panel and getting into our dear panelists and hear from them, I have some short housekeeping notes that I would like to ask you. We will have about a 45-minute conversation between myself and our panelists, and we will then open up the session to questions, and we will take questions from the audience. I will be monitoring the question and answer portion of today's event, so you can Send me your questions for the Q&A section. You are only able to submit written questions, unfortunately. If you have a question, you may submit your question via the Zoom Q&A function, a little box on the bottom that says Q&A, and I will read it aloud to our audience and our panelists. With all questions, please be sure to write and share your name, your affiliation beforehand, and keep the questions short so our panelists will have time to answer. And a reminder that this conversation is being recorded. I would also like to acknowledge one more point for our audience. Besides having an extra vetting process to make sure we create a safe environment for our panelists and for such an important topic to be able to safely discuss it, I also want to mention that another reason for doing that was because we were told by CSW organizers that we have to be careful about the Zoom bombers and some internet harassers. So it is very important to know that as much as our topic is directly related to such an issue, unfortunately, this issue is an ongoing problem via online environments. So please keep that in mind as well. And we talked about the diaspora, Iranian diaspora, and I would like to give the podium to my panelists to first say hello and introduce themselves, and then we'll get to the questions. Please start, Golnaz, Farnaz, Sherif, welcome. We are very happy to have you today. Please make sure you unmute yourself and say hello and a few words, and we get to the questions. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Golnaz, and I'm happy to be with you. I think I'm very glad that you and Article 19 did this report about online harassment of female journalists, Iranian. It's a major problem, I think. I think it's hard to find a woman journalist that has not been harassed online and sexually harassed, I mean. And I look forward to the discussion.
Hi, I'm Farnaz. I'm really happy and excited to be here today because this is an extremely important and timely topic. The CPJ and Article 19 report, I think, is a path forward to first start acknowledging that this problem exists and then be able to talk about it and bring awareness to it. And also by bringing awareness to it, try to expose the people who and the entities that harass us and also hold them accountable. Thank you for your invitation.
Hi, my goal today is to speak the least. I am here to show my male privilege of being an exiled or dissident Egyptian journalist or human rights activist who do not suffer from all the panelists' harassment online. And the point I wanted to make is to always to come back to this discussion, but I'm happy to answer briefly anything that has to do with CPJ research on Iran and also coverage and help and support for exiled journalists from Iran.
Appreciate you, Sherif. You have a long history of working at CPJ and covering all kinds of issues in our region, Middle East and North Africa, including Iran. So we will get back to you with questions. But first, we will start with our female. Okay, I want to start by asking a question that I first initially created for our colleagues at the Article 19, but I would like Farnaz and Golnaz each take their time and participate in the conversation by answering this question. What do you think your if we start by saying that you guys both work for well-established media organizations, New York Times and Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, based on your experience of getting harassed online for years, and especially when the harassment got nastier and nastier and became more focused towards your gender as a woman, what do you think your employers could do to make your online environment safer for your work, so you could do your work properly and safer and more fulfilling?
Should I start? Should I go?
Please.
Okay. So as a woman who covers the Iran sort of sphere and the topic of Iran, as Yeganeh explained, Iran is very contentious. There's a lot of different opinions and, you know, a lot of divided sort of political leanings here and there. And this sense, I think, by both the Iranian regime and many groups of the opposition, that a journalist's role is to be an activist or to be a mouthpiece for either the viewpoints of the government or the viewpoints of the opposition, and that we have to abandon our professional work, something such as attending a press conference that a journalist does, or quoting officials from Iran. It's not that we get, and I would like to emphasize on this, when we're talking about harassment here, we're not talking about criticism of our work. We're not talking about, criticism that comes from a topic we covered or the way we covered it. We are talking about vicious, mobilized, coordinated, well-funded campaigns with bots and troll armies that move in coordination from both within the government in Iran and from established opposition funded by other governments, many of them, to target us journalists, particularly women. They include death threats, very vicious sexual threats, rape threats, harassment, doxing, in my particular case, doxing my home address on social media and asking for people to come and find me and rape me and kill me, attacking my family members. So a wide range of extremely disturbing pattern and behavior, right? So to your question, that what can an employee do? I am very fortunate that I work for an institution that has the resources to help its journalists get through online harassment and these kind of attacks. Because in our case, when you're working on Iran, the majority of these tweets are in Farsi, right? And when we report them to Twitter or to Facebook or whatnot, they tend to use an AI, right? So it's on us. The burden is on the victim to have to go through these very sort of disturbing tweets and not only be exposed to it, but also have to translate it to both show our employees. So one thing I think that employees can do is to make sure that they have the resources, or they can hire even temporarily a Farsi speaker to monitor and translate these attacks and establish a relationship with social media companies like Twitter, like Facebook, Telegram, and bring these to their attention directly and not rely on just the report button that exists, right? Our employees are important, but holding these social media companies is also extremely important. And to understand and to help them understand, to help your employees understand the context in which these attacks are happening, right? The coordinated way, and try to, so they can see that this isn't a one-off or sort of an organic criticism. It's very well coordinated, well funded, and mobilized campaign to attack us. So I think awareness and acknowledgement on the employees' parts, I think putting in place checks and balances that protect the reporter, right, from me constantly being exposed to this. Having someone who actually monitors these attacks for you, translates them, and takes security action, I think is extremely important. I have always said, when asked about this issue, that that I'm fortunate that, I have a 30-year career, that I have, I'm an experienced journalist, and I work for one of the best news organizations in the world with the best resources. But it really worries me to think what these vicious campaigns can do to younger women journalists who are freelancers, who are just starting at the beginning of their career. I mentor a lot of younger journalists, and they tell me that watching what these kind of attacks on you makes us wonder if we really want to engage in the Iran coverage. And I think that's very sad. That would be the trolls winning, because ultimately their goal, no matter which side of the political line they are, their goals in targeting and harassing women is to silence us, right? And that's what we can't let happen.
Thank you so much. Golnaz, would you like to chime in?
No, I just Farnaz made a very good point about younger women journalists, not knowing what to do. I remember the first time I faced this type of attacks, I was terrified, and I didn't know. I blamed myself. I thought I did something wrong. Why is this happening? Then I realized I didn't do anything wrong, and there are people out there who think, our work is very stressful. We have deadlines. We have to cover. Usually in Iran, it's always bad things happening, people being tortured, people being killed by the government. So it's very stressful. And on top of that, you have people out there who don't even know, what amazes me that is some of these people, I've realized they don't even look at my articles. They never read. They just hear something, or maybe they're asked by someone to do this. And then they come online, and feel entitled to attack me. And it's not just, as Farnaz said, it's not a critic of our work. They want to destroy us. They want to silence us, And I usually don't like to talk about these attacks, but I felt, even today, I was reluctant to come online and speak to your audience, but I feel it's important, because if other journalists see this and see that they're not alone, that this is happening to many of us, I think it's hard to find a woman who has not been targeted online. And I see that some of the journalists I know, women journalists, Iranian, they've been intimidated by these attacks, and this should not happen. They practice self-censorship, or they reduce their online presence, and I don't want to see this happen. This should not happen. We have to speak up, and we have to tell these people who are doing this thing that this is totally wrong. They have no reason to do this. They don't like my reporting. Why do they call me a slut? Why do I have to come online? This happened this morning, and read tweets about me, calling me the C word, or horrible things. It should stop. This should stop.
May I add, one of the other things that they do is openly call, this has happened to me twice, an internet activist in London and a thuggish activist in LA. These are not anonymous people. They have gone online on Twitter and on Clubhouse and told everybody that one of the best strategies is to try to get these women to have mental breakdowns and nervous breakdowns. They say that openly. And we should all mobilize and harass them and their families every day until they have mental breakdowns, right? So targeting a woman, targeting the mental health of a woman, targeting the employment of a woman, these are all red flags. None of this is normal, right? It is definitely not normal.
Farnaz, I have a follow-up questions about what you just said and what you briefly pointed to, previously answering the previous question. What I would like our audience to know how bad the situation and out of control is getting for female journalists like you, covering a very diverse and unfortunately conflicted, politically and psychologically conflicted Iranian diaspora is. Has these form of online harassment ever crossed over into your real life instances of threats and abuse? And what have you been able to do to confront those attacks?
Unfortunately, we may think that the world of online harassment is virtual, it's not real, these are anonymous accounts, let's ignore them, but they're not. And at least in my case, they have manifested physically into the non-virtual world in forms of harassment of my elderly mother, showing up outside of her work, harassing her. There was a night where we actually had to call the police because these thugs were outside of her building. It is manifested in calls, some guy showing up outside of the New York Times and then calls that someone was going to come to the building, to the office, and put 6 bullets in my head, where we had to call the police. It's a doxing of my address. I think home address was extremely serious. And, finding the phone numbers of my family members who had little kids and threatening them with text messages. So to the point where a relative was afraid of letting her children walk to school, in America. So it really has, I have to be extra diligent. We have made contacts to the police department with the FBI. As I have been told by the FBI, online harassment online death threats is a federal crime. This is not a joke. When you call for the murder of someone on Twitter, online, it is a federal crime.
But that's only in United States, probably. So let's hear from Golnaz, because I know she is not based in United States. What about you, Golnaz? Have you had such experiences in real life with these unfortunately out of control attacks?
Look, I mean, you call these online attacks, but it's obvious that it takes an emotional toll, being daily, reading these nasty comments without any reason. As I said, they really, if they go and read my articles, if they go and read our work, they would realize that this is all lies, but I think they know. They just, for some reason, as Farnaz said, they want us to be activists. These are people who don't understand or don't want to understand what journalism is. And I think one reason is that there are some journalists, Iranian journalists out there now who are paid by Saudi propaganda and others, and they're not professional. They've turned into more like activists. And these people want everyone who reports on Iran to become like them. I must say, I've never been subjected to the level of online harassment that Farnaz is subjected to. And for me, the worst was under former President Donald Trump. I think there was a surge in this sort of attacks against women and this sexual harassment of us. That was the worst. At that time, if you would just, for example, say something, trying to be fair, say like, yes, Iran is mismanaging the economy, but the sanctions are also, a big factor why there's so many people are suffering. Why, for example, I remember once I got under this really vicious attack just because I said, look, people are on Twitter, they're saying that there's a shortage of drug for cancer patients. There was, Human Rights Watch has done a report. The UN has reported this. And it's partly because of the sanctions. Even now, Rob Malley and others have acknowledged that the sanctions are hurting the Iranian people. But you were not, like, if you would dare say something like that, they would just like, and it always started with one of, and these people are known. They sometimes work in DC think tanks, others. One of them, they would come and didn't like, you see that that person didn't like your comment, so he would leave a negative comment or retweet with his comment, and then the mob would come, and then it was hell unleashed. So I think that was it has gotten less, I must say. I think Farnaz has a different experience. I can't say, I don't know who these people are. We don't know if these are people working for the Iranian government or working for the opposition. It's not clear because most of them are anonymous. There was just one known case, the Iran Disinfo project that was defunded by the State Department. So that was known, but we don't know if there were more, if the administration had funded other groups. We don't know at this point.
I mean, this is not, we've analyzed these for a while and sort of tried to map them. As Golnaz said, usually the way it starts is by known activists. The Iranian information woman who was defunded because she basically ran a trolling, on tax-funded money, she ran a trolling operation attacking activists and journalists and harassing people. And once that got defunded, it seems that she's gone underground. The same trolls, the same people still exist in their own names. They're constantly attacking us. There's, several of them that do this. And as soon as they send the signal, and they're, they're clever enough not to issue death threats, but they say things like, we fantasize about prosecuting these journalists, or that they are part of they're lobbyists, or they are, funding, smear attacks. And as soon as this signals to them, and they all work in coordination, right? The same wording, the same thing, all fire off at the same time. Then at that time, they unleash the mobs on us, which are, many of them are anonymous. But there was a cyber analysis of the attacks on me done by an expert, cyber expert. And he found that the majority of them come from sock puppet accounts that belong to either the monarchist opposition or to the MEK, right? And then you also have these opposition trolls. I mean, I have heard that some of these women's rights activists, some of these, the Iran Disinfo, they actually put people on the payroll and give them a little bit of money to sort of do this online cyber harassing of us because they don't want to be the face, and they get funding from other governments. Human rights organizations tend to only focus on the Iranian government, which is also a problem. I think if you're Iran, and I think we need to acknowledge this, and you're seeing this happen, you might try to replicate it or pretend that you're the opposition because it's to your benefit. So that we're also facing that. But I think some of these opposition groups do such a great job with their own names harassing us that, like I said, there was, there's this group in DC that made a video after a report that I had done that was exactly like at the 2030. There's a famous Iran State TV 2030 program where they've made videos of Jason, they've made videos of us that says, here with this dramatic music showing our facing, here is the representative, the representative, we want to show you the representative of the CIA in the media. Here are the intelligence infiltrators within the media who are manipulating the truth. This opposition group, which calls itself Democratic something, makes a video of me, Negar Mortazavi, and I think I want to say Barbara Slavin, but another, I'm three women saying, we want to show you these three women who are infiltrators in US media and think tanks, who are lobbying for Iran, who are agents of the Iran government, dramatic music. So you look at that, you're like, you are presenting yourself as an alternative to a dictatorship regime, deploying the exact same tactics. And these things are being spread by opposition people, by real opposition figures, right? And it makes you wonder, what if you claim to be, the first rule of democracy is a free press and an objective press, and also a discourse that's respectful. You don't have to resort to name calling or smearing, rape threats or death threats to be able to talk about the fact that you may want me to cover this differently, right? You can say it in a respectful way.
Right. Thank you, Farnaz.
Can I just add something?
Sure, please.
something I understand is that there are lots of people out there who are extremely angry at the Iranian establishment, and they have all the right to be. You know, they're still angry about what happened in November 2019, when at least 300 people were killed in the streets, including children. They downed the IRGC, downed this Ukrainian plane. So many people died, bright, brilliant Iranian Canadians. So I understand there's lots of anger and hatred towards this regime. It's totally understandable. But people have to understand that we are journalists. We are not activists. I haven't chosen to be an activist. We are not in the business of bringing down the regime. It's not our work. But we do cover what's happening on the ground. You know, they don't even bother to go read my reports. How many reports have I done? Daily, I write about human rights abuses in Iran. So
that's a very
Farnaz,
good point.
Other journalists.
Thank you very much, Golnaz. That's a very good point. I always tell people that harassment is not the criticism of these journalists' work. If you want to criticize them, go criticize their work. But I have one question related to this last point you made. But before that, I just want to add this point for our audience who may or may not read the report, that when we in Article 19 co-authored this report, we ended up anonymizing the names of the female journalists who were interviewed for this report. And the main reason behind that decision was to make sure that by just interviewing them and them sharing their plight, they don't get any more harassed. Because some of them were very, including Farnaz and you, Golnaz. So I want to make sure that people know, and I don't want them to go back and read the report and say these could completely be made up. No, we made the decision to keep their names under wrap because we wanted to make sure that they won't get harassed any more than what they are because of their work. But I have a question regarding this last point you made, and then I would want to bring Sherif's voice in. And the question is, obviously you are both, and other colleagues of yours, female Iranian journalists in the diaspora, are getting harassed online day and night for their work covering theocracy, a totalitarian regime that we all want to see gone. But in the meantime, you guys are also being harassed by the regime inside the country. So as Farnaz said, they have, like, inside Iran, the regime has a nightly primetime news, sometimes talking about you guys and making scary videos. And so you guys are being basically threatened and harassed from both sides. And I want you to talk a little bit about that kind of experience, the attacks that you get from regime and pro-regime folks, but also, and link that to how that is, I would say, if I was reporting like you on daily basis, that would be completely intolerable, because you are trying to shed light on everything that the regime is doing wrong to people, but at the same time, the opposition is not accepting what you're reporting on necessarily, and they are not reading your report.
Well, we have been, both Golnaz and I can't return to Iran. I mean, you just saw yesterday, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe was released along with another UK. Jason, my good friend, Yeganeh's husband, Jason Rezaian, was jailed. He was a journalist. And it is not a safe place for, generally a safe place for dual nationals who are journalists, particularly working for foreign media. But more specific, I have received over the years that I covered Iran, constant, and it was in different forms and shapes, constant, not just harassment, but state interrogation. During the times that I would travel to the country, at least twice a year, I would get called in by the intelligence ministry and be interrogated for hours and hours. And that's very scary, because once you go into that building, you don't know if you're going to come out, right? You don't know if every time I went to the airport, every time I went to Iran on assignment, I didn't know if when I went to the airport, they would let me fly, because many times they would arrest people. In 2009, when I was covering the uprising and going to the protests where they were openly shooting at people in front of me. In fact, one young man was shot in the neck, 5 meters away from me, right in front of my eyes. During that time, the Ministry of Guidance and Culture, which actually oversees the foreign correspondents who come, called me and said, are you okay? This was a woman there who knew me. I said, yes, I'm okay. Why? She said, well, because they have started a rumor that the snipers have the photograph and the name of the Wall Street Journal reporter, and they've been ordered to shoot. So if I were you, I wouldn't go out. We heard you were shot by snipers. And I said, no, I'm not shot. I said, and there's no other Wall Street Journal report. I said, so just take this as a warning. They've started this. So even death threats, kind of veiled death threats, right? This was the condition of working in the country, right? When you, at some point where it became obvious that it was too dangerous to report Iran from Iran, or they weren't letting us report Iran from Iran, they've told me you're not allowed to go work in Iran. We tried to do it remotely. And I think me and Golnaz and others are able to do it remotely, I think, because we've spent so many years covering it that we have contacts, we have sources, we speak the language, we know the story, right? So we've got a grip on what's going on and we can do it remotely. But the threats didn't stop. In 2015, I woke up one day and on the front page of Kayhan, which is the ultra hardline newspaper of Iran, there was a huge headline saying that we found the link. The Wall Street Journal reporter is the link between Mossad and CIA and Iran's opposition. Completely fabricated, calling for me to be prosecuted, for my bones to be thrown to the dogs, threatening my family members. So things can get pretty scary on both sides of the divide, right? And one of the ways that they like to, the Iranian side likes to intimidate us is by saying you're a spy, you're an agent of this spy agency or that spy agency, you're infiltrating, you're trying to create threats to national security. And the opposition uses exactly those same words by saying you're a lobby for the Iranian government, you're a propaganda arm of the, so we get it from both sides. It's very difficult work. I think journalism is not for the faint-hearted. We do this because we believe that we have a responsibility to the truth. We have a responsibility to fair and accurate reporting. And what we do is important because, in all the noise of how the government and the regime wants to dominate the narrative, how the opposition wants to narrate the narrative, we're trying to record what we think and report that is factually true. And so that's my.
Thank you.
How you're pressured from both sides.
Would you like to tell us about your experience of being harassed by the regime?
Sorry, so me and my colleagues in the Persian service, we face threat from the Iranian government. Always, there are attempts at hacking our accounts. As Farnaz said, we are not allowed to return to our country, and we still have family there. I think the worst part for many Iranian journalists outside the country, people with Radio Free Europe, the BBC and others, is that they still have people they love there. And the worst for me is that when I read online that this and that says, oh, my brother died and I hadn't seen him for 6 years, or my mother died and I wasn't able to say goodbye. It's horrible. I personally had a very tragic loss in my family about 2 years ago, and I wasn't able to go back to be with my loved ones during those difficult times. So it's very hard. The Iranian government has launched a website where they post our private information and information from my colleagues of the Persian service. It's just an attempt to silence us, all these threats, sexual harassment, all of it. And I'm not so sure, I don't know if these people are really on the other side or the opposition, or if it's the Iranian government doing this, because this, I think this is something, this is tactic that Iran has used forever. And Iran benefits from this. They want to create, differences between Iranians, they don't want people to unite. Instead of going after the regime, people go after Farnaz, or they go after me or other journalists. Who benefits from this? The Islamic Republic.
Unfortunately, the division in the diaspora stabilize and legitimize the regime inside the country rather than us being more united. Unfortunately, there's more division. Sherif, I would like to ask you a question based on your years of experience dealing with such issues. You cover many, many countries at CPJ. What other countries do you see female journalists are being regularly and very systematically attacked the way female Iranian journalists in diaspora are being attacked? We obviously, you and I both very well know about the case of Rana Ayyub, and we were recently talking about Ida. So if you would like to talk a little bit about those countries and the similarities and how they are systematically similar or different.
Absolutely. Well, Iran as a country is one of the most censored countries of the world, according to CPJ. 3 times when we did our analysis in 2009 and as latest as 2020. It's also one of the worst jailers of journalists in the world. And in some ways, we have documented the largest wave of exiled journalists in 2010 and 2013. More than 100 journalists went to exile. And since then, the government have not stopped going after them. We at CPJ are lucky that we've been able to advocate for you, Yegi, for example, when you were in jail, that you were able to join us in exile and also report on threats against journalists in exile. Many of them reside in Turkey first, face a lot of threats physically and otherwise. But it's not just Iran, just neighboring Saudi Arabia have a lot of threats against exiled female journalists and exiled journalists, and even Morocco continues to use this online trolling and threats against those who help journalists who are behind bars. And I want to say that particularly exiled journalists from Iran, we saw a spike in threats in cases like Ruhollah Zam, who was extradited and forced back into execution a few years ago from Turkey. And even in New York, against someone like Masih Ali-Nejadi, who the FBI have said that have been monitored by Iranian government regime. Those kind of threats shows that it's not just specific to Iranian female journalists or just those who are inside the country, but also outside the country.
Can I just say something? I'm glad that Sherif, as a man, is part of the panel, because I think many men don't understand what female journalists face, the kind of threats, we face, the kind of abuse we face. I remember there was a discussion online, and we have to block these people who use sexual slurs or who threaten to rape us. I mean, because they close all the doors to any kind of civilized exchange. We have no other choice. I block them and I report to Twitter or wherever the abuse is happening. And I remember a male colleague said very proudly, he was so proud of himself. He said, "I've never blocked anyone." I said, "Yeah, because you don't face this kind of, men don't, you don't face sexual harassment online. So they don't even understand it, lots of men." So I'm really glad that you're here in this panel.
Yes, Sherif, I second that. Thank you for joining us. Good to have solidarity from our male colleagues.
I just want to tell our audience that the podium is open. The Q&A section of the panel is open, and if they want to submit any question in a written form, we would welcome that. Sherif, I want you to talk a little bit about what you and I do daily in terms of covering other female journalists from other countries. Please talk a little bit about the similarities of the harasses that Farnaz and Golnaz experience with what Rana, Ayub, or Aida in Morocco have experienced. I want our panelists obviously brightly know that unfortunately they are not alone, and other female journalists from other nations are subjected to similar experiences. But also I want our audience to know that this is a major issue. It's not an issue that will correct itself, and it's not just limited to Iran, but I hope that there are some Iranian oppositions who have joined us today, and they know that we welcome their criticisms as journalists on our work, but we do not welcome their harassment.
Yeah, and I think there needs to be a recognition that harassment, smearing someone, calling someone a lobbyist for a dictatorship regime is harassment. Constantly trolling someone is called harassment. Harassment isn't just death threats. I mean, death threats are death threats, rape threats are rape threat. Online bullying and harassment is when you zero in on someone and constantly, retweet something, constantly attack them, constantly harass them with really cheap smearing language. That's also harassment. And that really, I think, closes the door for any kind of discourse on how our coverage is, when that's how you start.
Sherif, would you like to say something? And then I have a question from the audience that I would like to ask. So I asked my question and I think we lost Sherif for momentarily. So the question is, both Farnaz and Golnaz, feel free to chime in. What kind of responses or support have you received from the social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter once you get in touch with them and inform them about whatever that is going on in your platform?
Social media companies, particularly Twitter, because a lot of this happens on Twitter, need to step up and be more responsible and understand that their platform is a very useful reporting tool for us, but it's also a platform where it's not safe for women to operate, where it's being used to attack and harass and bully women. It's a constant conversation that we have with them. They have, it's not to our satisfaction, particularly because these attacks are in our case in Farsi, and I've heard this from my Japanese colleague too, that the attacks are in Japanese or they're in Chinese, and it gets very complicated. Sometimes it takes, if you report it the regular way, right? They have an AI, like if you report the tweet through the regular mechanism that's on the tweet, an AI translates it and doesn't understand the nuance, doesn't understand what this language means. So they may think this doesn't violate and the tweet stand, it doesn't violate it. So it gets frustrating. So a place like the New York Times has established contacts at Twitter and at social media that can take these things to them, right? But I definitely think that that Twitter and other social media groups like Facebook and others have to not just look at each individual tweet and see whether they have to have a more holistic approach to the organized. If there are 1,000 tweets from anonymous accounts, Twitter should be able to figure out how they're linked and take a collective action, right? And try to shut it down. If they're sock puppet accounts, if they're troll accounts, if they're bots, right? And they've done that in other cases. And I think it gets a little frustrating where, they approach each tweet with a word by word translation of whether this violates our rules or doesn't violate our rules. So I think that we should all demand more accountability from Twitter. We should put pressure on Twitter and others to be more responsible and to really try to make this space safe for women. It isn't safe right now. Golnaz, do you have anything to add?
I agree. I agree that social media companies need to do more. What I do when someone uses, you know, sexual slurs and insults, I just block that person, as I said, because what else? I mean, there's no way to have a conversation with someone like that. And I report them. Sometimes they get back to me saying that, you know, yeah, we suspended this account or this tweet, but often it also happens that it's in Persian and they just say that, you know, I get this automatic message saying like there was nothing wrong with this tweet. It just happened to me this morning. Yeah, so they need to find better ways to make it safer, these platforms for women.
I just saw a tweet on Twitter about our conversation, and something just occurred to me that I would like to ask you, Golnaz and Farnaz. Have you ever engaged, it may not directly be related to the report, just want to know if you have personally ever engaged with, not the trolls or bots, obviously that's not really possible, but with one particular person who tweets at you. Golnaz said it's impossible to have civilized conversation with these people, but if someone is a very known figure in our diaspora and has ever tweeted in a harassing way too, have you ever tried, and what was the result? This is just a personal curiosity because I am seeing some of those folks tweeting about our conversation right now, and I would like us to use this podium live to address them.
No, I said that I don't engage with people who use bad language. You know, with those people, there's no way to speak to. Just a few days ago, someone on Instagram, I think this woman, she's an artist, I think, and I like the work she has posted online. I've seen it on Twitter, and she tagged me, and she had posted something about this panel and has said that we're mouthpieces of the Iranian regime. And I just responded, I said, hello, it would be, you know, you should just read my reports instead of spreading baseless accusations against me. Just first read my reports, please. And she just responded, oh, I know you and your friends. You know, what does it mean? You know me, you know my family, you know and who are my friends? I don't know. You mean Farnaz? She's my colleague. She's a colleague, and we've never met in person. And even if she's my friend, so what? I mean, what does it mean? So I didn't, you know, answer back because what was I was so surprised because I'm 100% sure she hasn't read my reports.
These are malicious attacks. I mean, to answer your question, I engage with whoever that can respectfully have a conversation or criticism of work, or have a constructive, polite, civil conversation about coverage, about specific articles, about specific issues. I do not engage with bullies. I don't engage with people who smear me, who call me names, who target me, because I don't think that it's helpful. I think that they are agenda driven, and it's not whether they're looking for bait. And I think that we all know from bullies in school that the best way to rattle a bully is to A, expose them, and to B, ignore them.
Thank you very much.
One more thing I have to say, I have noticed in the, you know, as I have spoken out more about these attacks, that it gets more vicious. That what the thing that really bothers them is that we speak up, is that we say, these are the trolls, this is what they do, anybody who's talking about Iran coverage, Iran politics, must acknowledge the violence and the trolling and the harassment targeted at journalists, at women particularly, that comes from both the government and some groups within the opposition. Just because you're an opposition or an activist working against a dictatorship government does not allow you to issue death threats, rape threats, harass us for the way we look, for the way our bodies are, for the way we talk, because the fact that we're women. That is no excuse. Right? So you
Very well said.
You can be the one is not exclusive to the other. Just because you're in opposition, it doesn't make you, it doesn't make it okay to behave that way.
Right. It doesn't make you righteous.
No, and it doesn't make you righteous. And it doesn't mean that I have to protect you. If you don't want me to call you out, don't do it. This is what I say to the Iranian government. I think when Roxana Saberi, who was a journalist, was arrested in Iran, and I was writing about her, someone from the Iranian government said to me, stop writing these articles, stop writing these, why are you writing? And I said, if you want me to stop writing about you arresting journalists, you should stop arresting journalists. Whenever you stop doing that, I'll stop writing, right? And I say the same thing, whenever they stop harassing us, I'll stop talking. Until then, we will speak up.
Good. We have another question from the audience saying that their understanding is that the majority of university goers and university students these days, at least for the past few years since I was a student in Iran, I remember, are women. Beyond politics, do you think this is related to silencing Iranian women's voices?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if you look at they have 5 favorite women that 5 or 6 favorite women that they target, right? Journalists, Tara Seperifar from Human Rights Watch, Golnaz, Azadeh Moaveni from Crisis Group. There are 5 or 6, Ariane Tabatabai, who is now in the government, but before she was with RAND. So they go after women who are prominent in what they do. They're well known, but they also have prominent platforms or influential platforms, right? They target a lot of people, but I think the focus on people that they think have a more influential is because they want to silence us. It's because they want to intimidate us.
Golnaz, what do you think? You just said that one of your colleagues said a male colleague said he had never had to block anyone on Twitter. Can you, if you can share with us, if that colleague was an Iranian man or
Iranian journalist man? Yes.
So he's not getting the amount of harassed or any
men. I'm not saying men don't get harassed. Male journalists, they do. There are a few known, and because they're outspoken and they refuse to be intimidated. I think that's one of the things that bother these trolls, is that we refuse to be intimidated. And they get lots of abuse. Like one of them, I don't want to name anyone here, but I see daily, horrible. But it's not sexual abuse. Women are targeted sexually harassed online. We are seen that we always get comment about our look. We get death threats. We get rape threats. I'm going to do this and that to you, and you're this and that. Men don't get it's different. It's different. I don't think men, they don't get this kind of sexually based harassment that we are subjected to on a daily basis.
I mean, there's just this week, Farnaz Fassihi, who's a BBC correspondent, a woman, was a subject of vicious trolling and harassing after an opposition cartoonist drew her. He drew a very small head. I mean, it can't be any more sexist than that. A very small head and a very large, disproportionate body, right? Sexualizing her body from behind as an attack with a tiny head. What does this say to you? Targeting a woman, body shaming a woman, targeting a woman, and in clearly saying you have a small brain, but look at your butt. This is shameful.
It is unfortunately very shameful. I saw the picture and the cartoon, and it is very shameful.
And then everybody and then she's being, subject of, BBC, we don't like BBC, so let's harass this women reporter for the way she looks for her body and suggest that she has a small brain because we have an issue with the way BBC covers Iran. Are you kidding me?
She doesn't even report on Iran anymore. She's in the BBC World Service and is doing a great job and being a great representative of Iranian women in foreign media. So I would like to check one more time. Oh, so we have a question. Someone says, my name is Raima. I am hoping that I'm not butchering your name, or Rima, and I'm a translator. I would like to touch on the subject of criticism. We all know that a journalist is not an activist. However, there's a moral responsibility that should be taken very seriously. So I think this is more like a comment than a question, but still I would like to read it. A journalist should report on accurate news based on solid evidence. We all agree on that. Saying the truth is the first principle of journalism. Absolutely. I have seen in many occasions in social media criticism towards the information. Farnaz, this is directed towards you, that Miss Fassihi decided not to convey in her reports about events taking place in Iran. She chooses to block and avoids answering. I would like to refer to the letter addressed to the New York Times about her work as a journalist. The letter is a formal letter written and signed by many Iranian professionals from around the world criticizing her work as a journalist. Farnaz, do you have any comment about the report and this question, which is not basically a question, but
if anybody has a criticism, particular criticism to work, they think criticism to work means, why are you not including the rumors that we tell you, the ideas that we have, in your report? Why are you why are you even reporting that Iran has a reformist political faction? Because we think it's all united and they're all hardliners and all. So if you're reporting that there even exists the reform, which is a fact, then you're inaccurately reporting. We're coming to you with this rumor that we have about what did this, what did that, why don't you report it? I have to verify. You come to me with information, I have to verify it. I have to verify, triple source it independently. If I can't do that, I can't publish it. And then when we don't publish it, they think we're leaving it out. No, because I can't verify your claims, right? So criticism is fine. Letters that start with you have an infiltrator, lobbyist, agent of the Islamic Republic in your newsroom, get thrown out. I'm not going to engage. I'm not going to engage on that with anyone when that's the basis, right? When it's based on infactual, again, as Golnaz pointed out, when criticism is based on their idea of how we need to be their mouthpiece rather than how we professionally do our jobs, right? Then it's very hard to sort of come to a middle ground. But I have always said I'm open to constructive criticism, civil discourse, but not harassment, not attacking, not bullying.
Thank you so much. And thank you to Rima Shir Mohammadi for her comment. And she's also thanking you, Farnaz, for giving your feedback on her comment. And I think we are at time, and I would like to thank our panelists, Farnaz Fassihi from the New York Times and Golnaz Esfandiari from the Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty, and my colleague Sherif Mansour, who briefly joined us with his brilliant background information. It's been a pleasure being with all of you today. We still feel sad that we did not have our colleagues and co-authors on this report from the Article 19 with us. The truth is that problems like this do not solve themselves, and it is by raising awareness and having, as Farnaz said, civil discourse that we can find solutions for such problems. Please continue supporting Article 19 and the Committee to Protect Journalists in their fight for press freedom and journalist safety. We thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day wherever you are, and happy St. Patrick's Day to those folks who are celebrating. Thank you again. Farnaz, Golnaz, Sherif, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Yeganeh, John, Sherif, and CPJ Article 19. Golnaz, great to see you. Thank you all for giving us the chance to talk about this very important topic. Thank you.
Thank you.